The Thefts of the Season. Complete audiobook. Welcome to Whispers by Maga Audiobooks. I invite you to listen to this fun and intense story. Make yourselves comfortable, because the magic is about to begin. Chapter 1: Lady Aurora's Notebook. The Pembroke's ballroom sparkled like an open chest. Crystal chandeliers multiplied the light in gilded mirrors, while jeweled ladies displayed smiles as bright as their necklaces. But Lady Aurora Pembroke was not there to show herself off, nor to be swept away by a waltz. She was hunting. Hidden behind her fan, she pretended to admire the decorations, while in truth she drew from its folds a far more precious object, a small notebook bound in green leather. No one suspected that this delicate lady spent her nights writing down observations worthy of a police inspector. On the very first page, written with a steady hand, stood the heading: The Thefts of the London Season, Year 1815. She already had 2 entries. Ball at the Radcliffe residence, a pair of gold cufflinks disappeared. Soiree at the Montagues, a diamond locket stolen. Aurora was turning over possible patterns in her mind when suddenly something caught her eye. A maid, breathless, slipped across the hall with furtive steps and bent down to whisper something in the ear of the hostess, Lady Worthington. At once, the color drained from the lady's face. She quickly regained her composure with a forced laugh and went on greeting her guests as if nothing had happened. Aurora narrowed her eyes. That reaction would not escape anyone truly observant. She leaned toward her friend, Beatrice Harlow. "What has happened?" she murmured. "They say," Beatrice lowered her voice, "Lady Worthington's emerald bracelet has vanished. In the middle of the ball." Aurora swiftly noted in her notebook, with a spark of satisfaction. Ball at the Worthington residence, emerald bracelet vanished in full view of the hall. That makes 3, she thought, closing the cover with care. Her fan moved subtly as she studied the guests, sketching suspects in her mind. Miss Amelia Radcliffe, smiling as if hiding a mischief. Colonel Whitmore, moving with an agility that ill-suited his belly and his rank. Lady Selina Montague, whose hands seemed more interested in others' jewels than in her own glass of champagne. And then she saw him. At the far end of the ballroom, standing in the shadows, was a man dressed in black, watching the bustle with calm detachment. He did not dance, did not converse, did not laugh. He only watched. Aurora felt a tingle in her stomach. She wrote quickly in her notebook. Man in black. Suspicious behavior. Avoids dancing. Watches too closely. "Who is that?" she asked Beatrice, never taking her eyes off the stranger. "Lord Nathaniel Blackwood," she whispered. "Mysterious, reserved, it is said he rarely smiles and never dances." "Perfect," Aurora murmured with a crooked smile. "A man who tries so hard to be invisible is, without doubt, visible to me." As if hearing her thoughts, Nathaniel lifted his gaze. His dark, steady eyes met Aurora's. There was no greeting, no smile, only an inquisitive coldness that made her feel, for an instant, as if she were the suspect. Aurora lowered her notebook, but did not put it away. She kept it close, like a weapon ready to be used. She did not yet know that he, too, was taking notes that night. Amid candlelight and vanished jewels, Lady Aurora Pembroke had found the mystery she longed for. And perhaps also her most dangerous rival. The game had begun. Chapter 2: Shadows and Suspicions. If the chandeliers were to go dark, I am certain the sparkle of their jewels alone would be enough to light all of London. The hall buzzed with music and conversation, but Aurora saw and heard only what might feed her notebook. While couples spun in flawless waltzes, she kept to the side, as if the spectacle belonged to her alone. She opened the notebook discreetly and let her fan shield it, while her eyes darted like hawks across the room. Entry 1. Lady Amelia Radcliffe. Too cheerful. Adjusts her glove insistently, as if hiding something inside. Question. Where was she during the first part of the ball? Entry 2. Colonel Whitmore. Complains of rheumatism, yet moves with the lightness of a young man. Suspicious for his excessive composure. Note: hands too rough, could force a clasp with ease. Aurora lifted her gaze just in time to catch a curious scene. Lady Selina Montague was examining another lady's necklace with almost indecent fascination, leaning so close it seemed she was weighing each gem with her nose. Aurora smiled with mischief and jotted it down without delay. Entry 3. Lady Selina. Suspicious fondness for others' jewels. Long, restless fingers. Watch closely. While writing, she felt a tingle at the back of her neck. She raised her head and found him. Lord Nathaniel Blackwood still lingered in his corner, apart, but his eyes were fixed on her. Not on Beatrice, not on the dance floor, but on her, as if he could see what she was hiding behind her fan. Aurora held his gaze a moment longer than she should have before turning back to her notebook. With a firm stroke she wrote. Entry 4. Man in black, Lord Blackwood. Does not dance, does not converse, only observes. His attention fixed on this investigator. Suspicious, or competing? She closed the notebook with a soft snap, but then something on the floor caught her eye, a gentleman's glove, dark leather, finely embroidered. It did not belong to a footman or servant, it was clearly the possession of someone of high rank. Aurora picked it up discreetly and quickly noted. First physical clue, men's glove. Accident or message? Before she could hide it properly, a step sounded behind her. Aurora turned sharply and saw him, Nathaniel, leaning calmly against the arch of the gallery, as if he had been waiting for her. Did you lose something, Lady Pembroke? He asked in a deep voice, his gaze fixed on her hands. Aurora felt the weight of the glove concealed beneath her gown. Only a few moments of quiet, my lord, she answered, with a flawless smile that betrayed no unease. He took a step forward, slow and deliberate. Curious. I would swear that what you guard so carefully is not peace but a secret. Aurora tilted her head, amused. And I would swear that your favorite pastime is startling ladies in deserted corridors. The half-smile Nathaniel allowed himself was as scarce as it was dangerous. Perhaps, Lady Pembroke, we both have rather indecorous inclinations. Voices calling for the next dance interrupted them. Aurora bowed her head with grace and returned to the hall, leaving the man in the shadows. That night, as she reviewed her notebook, she added one final note. Glove found before word of the stolen watch. Lord Blackwood, inconvenient witness, or far too close to the truth. Chapter 3 A Duel of Words. Lady Pembroke, the evening has not even begun and it already feels like a play. Shall we wager the performance will have an unexpected twist? The morning after the Worthington ball dawned with London noisier than ever. The rumors of the stolen bracelet traveled faster than the carriages, every lady had her own version, every gentleman his personal theory, and the servants repeated everything with such enthusiasm that the details multiplied. Aurora listened discreetly from the family carriage, as she accompanied her mother along Bond Street. Conversations drifted out from every open shopfront. They say it was a foreigner, disguised as a guest, murmured one lady with theatrical flair. Nonsense, another replied. It was a woman disguised as a man. That is the only explanation. I tell you it was the servants. It always is. Aurora smiled to herself, though inwardly she was taking mental note. Rumors multiply without proof. Suspects. Anyone imaginative enough to wear a disguise, and anyone cowardly enough to blame the servants. That very night, at the Harringtons' reception, she set her strategy in motion once more. Between conversations about horses, fashions, and politics, she slipped away toward a quieter gallery, where she could open her notebook under the cover of her fan. Entry 5. Sir Edmund Pritchard. Absent just before the bracelet was reported missing. Excuse. Stomach upset. Far too convenient. A deep voice startled her. You seem very diligent, Lady Pembroke. Aurora looked up in surprise. There was Nathaniel Blackwood, leaning just enough to read her expression, though not the notebook. She snapped it shut and arched a brow. I am keeping a list of dances, my lord. Surely you know a lady does not always recall with whom she has danced and with whom she has not. He tilted his head, amused. Curious. I thought ladies kept pressed flowers or romantic notes, not lists of suspects. Aurora fought back a flush and replied firmly. Suspects? I fear you listen to too many mystery novels. Nathaniel allowed himself the faintest smile, as though savoring the game. Or perhaps I observe too much. And if I am not mistaken, so do you. Aurora snapped open her fan, hiding half her face. Observation is the only possible distraction at such a predictable ball. Then we agree, he answered. The most interesting things are always in the corners. The silence that followed was brief but charged, like the first draw of a duel. She sensed that he knew something, he, in turn, perceived that she did as well. Aurora broke it with her usual audacity. Then I advise you, my lord, not to look too closely. You might end up on my list of pressed flowers. Nathaniel inclined his head in mock respect. I would feel honored, Lady Pembroke. Though I suspect the place you reserve for me will hardly be that of a rose. Aurora followed him with her eyes as he disappeared into the shadows of the hall. Her heart beat with an uneasy mixture of irritation and excitement. There was something in that man that challenged her wit, and she was not accustomed to losing ground. Returning to her seat, she caught a murmur between two hurried maids. They say Mrs. Harrington already plans to dismiss 3 footmen, to save face. And what if it wasn't them? The other replied, her eyes red from crying. That doesn't matter. The same ones always pay. Aurora closed her fan with a knot in her throat. The aristocracy played at scandal, but the servants paid with bread and shelter. That night, back in her chamber, she opened the notebook again and wrote with a mischievous smile, though her hand trembled slightly as she pressed the pen. Entry 6. Lord Nathaniel Blackwood. Far too perceptive. Far too close. Dangerously intriguing. Chapter 4. Traces in the Shadows. These two are not conversing. They are competing to see who can spill the most meaningless words in the least amount of time. The reception at the Harrington mansion glittered like a stage set. Marble columns, crystal chandeliers, and bejeweled ladies composed a perfect picture, though the whispers behind fans revealed something else: fear. Aurora slipped away from the main hall, where the music went on with stubborn courtesy, and walked down a dim side corridor. Her steps halted before a small low table. Upon it, barely covered by a lace handkerchief, rested a blue velvet box with the lid half open. Aurora held her breath. Cautiously, she lifted the lace and uncovered inside a cameo of gold and pearls, a jewel she remembered perfectly. Lady Cavendish had mourned its disappearance only last week. She drew out her notebook and quickly wrote. Cameo found in Harrington side corridor. Pattern confirmed. Thief does not steal to sell, but to hide. Uses host houses as temporary hiding places. A movement in the shadows made her turn. Nathaniel Blackwood was there, leaning against the gallery frame, arms crossed, with a half-smile that seemed a challenge. An interesting discovery for a young lady who came only for tea and music, he said in his deep voice. Aurora closed the box firmly and covered it again with the lace. And what are you doing, Lord Blackwood, in deserted corridors? She replied with a studied smile. Ensuring your hiding place remains untouched? He arched a brow. Or perhaps making sure you do not get yourself into more trouble. Aurora tilted her head, amused. I am sorry, my lord, but I fear that role is already claimed by too many gentlemen, and none with success. Their exchange was cut short by sudden commotion in the hall. A maid had rushed breathless to Lady Harrington and whispered something urgent. The rumor spread like fire in dry straw. The gentleman's pocket watch has vanished. The hall erupted in murmurs. Ladies clutching their necks, gentlemen indignant, servants running back and forth. Aurora and Nathaniel remained in the corridor, silent. She caught the sharp remark of a nearby viscount. First at Worthington, now at Harrington, and they still claim it is the servants. I say the thief walks among us with complete impunity. Aurora bit the edge of her fan. The echo of those words was clear, suspicion was climbing higher. Nathaniel leaned slightly toward her, his eyes fixed on hers. You see, Lady Pembroke? Bolder each time. Aurora murmured back, her spark unbroken. Or closer each time. And she noted mentally the most dangerous observation of all. Lord Blackwood keeps appearing where chaos erupts. Coincidence unlikely. Chapter 5: The Notebook of Suspicions. The ballroom still buzzed with music and forced laughter, but Aurora had discreetly withdrawn to a divan near the tall windows. With her fan firmly closed, she drew from the folds of her gown a small notebook bound in green leather, her secret treasure. By the faint glow of a candle hidden beneath a scarf, she opened the first page and began to write in her neat, steady hand. Preliminary list of suspects of the Great Thief of London, according to Lady Aurora Pembroke. Lord Nathaniel Blackwood. Far too observant to be innocent. Suspicious for his excessive composure. Note: appears at every scene as if summoned by the crime itself. Miss Harriet Wycliffe. More jewels than her father could possibly afford. Vanity, or a display meant to divert suspicion? Also, dances a little too close to the gentleman's pockets. The Viscount Ashbury. His outrage over the missing watch was overly theatrical. I distrust those who seem too perfect as victims. Perhaps he steals from himself just to draw attention. Lady Worthington. Hostess of the first scandals. Whoever commands the house also commands the keys and the passageways. Convenience or complicity? Others. Any lady with a fan. Any gentleman with deep pockets. Note: in this game, everyone hides something. Trust only my instinct. Aurora bit the end of her pen with a mischievous smile. She delighted in this game, though the consequences were far more serious than most cared to admit. A murmur nearby made her lift her gaze. Nathaniel was crossing the ballroom in her direction. Swiftly, she slipped the notebook beneath a cushion just as he reached her side. Lady Aurora, he said, bowing slightly. It is not customary for a lady to withdraw so far from the music. Nor for a gentleman to watch so closely what does not concern him, she replied, with a half-smile. He held her gaze with that intensity that made her feel uncovered. For an instant, Aurora feared he had glimpsed the glimmer of the pages. Sometimes, Nathaniel answered calmly, what happens in the shadows is far more interesting than what shines under the lamps. Aurora returned the smile, flawless and dangerous. How curious, my lord. That is exactly what I think. He retreated into the crowd with the elegance of a man who leaves a challenge on the table. Aurora retrieved her notebook and added, beneath Nathaniel's name. Confirmed. As irritating as he is fascinating. Suspect number 1. Later, as the servants cleared empty glasses, Aurora overheard whispers between two maids near the corridor. They say in the kitchen they're going to dismiss the Harrington seamstress. They blame her for not mending the gentleman's pocket in time. They always need a culprit, the other replied. Even when it has nothing to do with them. Aurora snapped her fan shut. Upstairs they played at mystery, downstairs, someone always paid the price. Chapter 6: Echoes of a Theft. The next morning dawned grey, as if even the London sky distrusted the events of the night before. Carriages went from house to house carrying rumours faster than any gazette, and the tea gatherings simmered with suspicion. A bracelet, a watch, what will be next? Said Lady Selina with a tragic air. I won't take the risk, replied another lady. My pearls will stay under lock and key until further notice. Aurora, discreet among the circle of guests, noted silently. Fear turns every lady into her own jailer. Suspects. All. Victims. As well. That same day, under the pretense of a courtesy visit, she slipped into the Harrington kitchens. There, the servants whispered in low voices, aware that any word could cost them their position. I heard the next ball will hire armed guards, said a footman as he polished cutlery. Guards? Scoffed the cook. As if a thief in white gloves feared a clumsy soldier. Well, I say it isn't one thief but several, added a maid. And they enjoy watching us take the blame. Aurora clenched her fists beneath her fan. This was no longer just an elegant game, hysteria was leaving a trail of innocence out on the streets. As she left through a side corridor, she ran into Nathaniel. His impeccable bearing contrasted with the shadow in his eyes. An interesting place for a lady of your rank, he said softly. Equally curious for a gentleman strolling among cooks, she replied, not yielding an inch. Nathaniel observed her in silence until a faint sound interrupted them, the crackle of an envelope dragged by the wind. Aurora picked it up from the floor. It was sealed with red wax, with no name on the outside. Upon opening it, she found a note written in a firm hand. The thief does not steal to possess. He steals to point a finger. The next strike will be at Montague. Aurora felt a shiver. Nathaniel, beside her, read the same phrase without changing his expression. A warning, or a trap? He asked. She tucked the envelope into her fan and replied with a dangerous half-smile. We'll find out at the next ball. And, my lord, I do expect to see you there. Nathaniel inclined his head slightly, as if sealing a tacit pact. You may be certain, Lady Pembroke. Where there is mystery, I will be. Aurora stepped away, her heart beating faster. That night, in her notebook, she wrote in bold strokes. New clue, anonymous letter. Deliberate pattern. Suspect pulling the strings, Blackwood, always Blackwood. Chapter 7 The Masquerade's Secret. The Montague masquerade glittered with every shade of excess. Gilded masks, swirling silks, chandeliers blazing like captured stars. Yet beneath the sparkle lurked whispers sharper than any diamond. Aurora Pembroke adjusted her mask of ivory lace, letting her gaze sweep across the throng. She had come not only to dazzle but to watch. Tonight, rumor said, the thief would strike again. Near the orchestra, Nathaniel Blackwood raised a glass of burgundy and met her eyes over the rim. His mask, black, severe, almost mocking, could not hide the amusement flickering there. You're late, he murmured when she drew near. I prefer entrances to arrivals, she replied smoothly, her fan tapping against her wrist. They drifted toward the edge of the ballroom, where the crowd's noise dulled into something more private. Aurora kept her voice low. The thief has taste, she said. Lady Ashcroft's emeralds are displayed like bait. And half the guests hover like hawks, Nathaniel returned. But hawks rarely catch smoke. Before she could answer, a sudden hush swept the hall. Gasps rippled like a tide. Lady Ashcroft herself stood pale and trembling, her necklace gone. The clasp dangled, snapped, at her throat. Thief! Cried a guest. The room erupted into chaos, ladies clutching pearls, gentlemen lunging toward shadows. Yet no figure emerged, no mask revealed a culprit. Only confusion remained, thick as perfume. Aurora's eyes darted across the ballroom. No one fled. No one shouted in triumph. It was as if the emeralds had vanished into air. Nathaniel leaned closer, his tone threaded with admiration. A perfect strike. In a room full of watchers. Aurora's pulse quickened, not from fear but from exhilaration. She whispered into her fan. Then the masquerade has only just begun. Chapter 8 Whispers in the Dark. The uproar of the masquerade still echoed through London long after the chandeliers had dimmed. By dawn, whispers of the vanished emeralds traveled faster than the carriages that carried them. Aurora Pembroke, however, did not sleep. In the quiet of her chamber, she lit a single candle and opened her leather-bound notebook. The ink flowed as swiftly as her thoughts. The thief strikes in plain sight. No brute, no common criminal. Precision and calculation mark every move. A knock at the door interrupted her writing. She slipped the notebook beneath a shawl and called out softly. Enter. Nathaniel Blackwood appeared, still in evening attire, the mask now gone but the shadow of irony ever present in his gaze. You take notes on scandals, Lady Pembroke? He asked. I take notes on puzzles, she countered. He closed the door behind him, lowering his voice. Then add this to your observations, the thief is not alone. Someone inside these houses helps him. Aurora felt her pulse quicken. An accomplice? Or a puppeteer, Nathaniel replied. One who knows where jewels lie, when guards change shifts, which locks are weakest. Chance cannot explain such perfection. Aurora studied him carefully, her candlelight catching the sharp lines of his face. Why tell me this? Because, Nathaniel said, stepping closer, you are already part of the game. Better to see the board than to stumble blind across it. For a moment, silence hung between them, an unspoken alliance, fragile and charged. Aurora finally turned back to her candle, her voice steady. Very well, Lord Blackwood. But understand this. I will never be a pawn. He smiled, faint but genuine, as though her defiance amused him. Nor I, Lady Pembroke. Nor I. When the door closed behind him, Aurora retrieved her notebook and wrote with firm strokes. The thief plays with shadows, but now the shadows whisper of more than jewels. There is a mind behind the mask. And I intend to unmask it. Chapter 9: The Echo of Scandal. It was that man, cried a guest, pointing at the colonel, who nearly choked in indignation. By the next morning, London awoke in greater turmoil than ever. The newspapers competed with grandiose headlines. Heroic intervention saves Lady Ashcroft. The phantom thief defies even armed guards. Staged spectacle at Montague House? At every aristocratic breakfast table, teacups rattled more from gossip than from porcelain. Did you see how he escaped? Exclaimed Lady Selina. Like smoke through one's fingers. They say there were 2 thieves, not one, added a viscount gravely. The first distracted in the ballroom while the other made his move in the corridors. How dreadful, gasped a lady. What if one of us is the next to be marked? Aurora, listening from an armchair, smiled coldly behind her fan. It is no longer fear, it is paranoia. Exactly what the thief intended. That afternoon, in a discreet bookshop in St. James's, Aurora pretended to browse volumes of poetry until she heard the voice she expected. A curious choice for one who prefers enigmas over sonnets, murmured Nathaniel, appearing at her side. Aurora closed the book and regarded him sideways. I am surprised you know the difference. He ignored the barb with elegance, resting a volume on the counter. The young man who tried to steal the necklace was clumsy. Far too clumsy. You think it was staged? She asked, though her notebook already bore that conclusion. Nathaniel gave the faintest nod. A thief so precise does not make such crude mistakes. Someone placed him there as bait, to distract us. Aurora felt a chill run through her. Distract us from what? Nathaniel studied her, as though weighing just how far he could trust her. At last, he drew a folded paper from his coat and laid it atop the poetry book. It was an invitation to an intimate dinner at Cavendish House, dated the same night as the Montague ball. While everyone chased a necklace in the ballroom, he said quietly, someone entered Lord Cavendish's study. They took documents concerning his ventures in India. Aurora caught her breath. Not jewels, papers. Secrets. Then the thief does not steal for greed. He steals for information. Nathaniel inclined his head slightly. Or to disgrace those with too much to lose. Aurora snapped her fan shut. Either way, I refuse to be a mere ornament in this game. For the first time, Nathaniel's smile held complicity rather than mockery. In that, Lady Pembroke, we agree. That night, in her chamber, Aurora wrote with decisive strokes in her notebook. Confirmed, the attempted theft at Montague was a diversion. True target, Cavendish documents. Dangerous conclusion, the thief knows every family's secrets. New threat, this is no parlor crime, it is a political game. She closed the notebook with force. The pieces had changed, and Aurora was more determined than ever not to let Nathaniel, or the thief, claim the upper hand. Chapter 10: The Perfect Trap. A silk handkerchief slipped from Ashbury's pocket at the worst possible moment, unleashing laughter and suspicion in equal measure. The Cavendish drawing room burned with murmurs. The scandal of the Montague ball had not yet faded, and yet everyone had gathered here eager for more spectacle disguised as music and champagne. Aurora moved among the guests with her usual elegance, fan in hand, smile calculated. She had learned that a measured gesture could be worth more than 1,000 excuses. It was just as the butler announced dessert that the rumor erupted. A maid, pale as wax, appeared with a small coffer in her hands and presented it trembling to Lady Cavendish. My lady, we found this in Lady Pembroke's chambers. Silence fell at once. Lady Cavendish opened the box, and the gleam of diamonds lit the room, a gold ring with sapphire, unmistakable. The lost jewel of the Duke of Ashbury. The ladies gasped in unison, the gentlemen exchanged stern glances. A viscount murmured with venomous voice. And to think she was always so intent on thefts, perhaps a little too intent. Aurora felt the blood pounding in her temples. She stepped forward, her fan closed like a weapon in her hand. That ring is not mine. Nor was it in my chambers when I arrived here. How convenient, retorted Lady Selina with a cruel smile. Perhaps your little notebook of suspects is nothing but a disguise to divert attention. The murmur swelled like a fire. Words such as guilty, shameless, scandal floated in the air. Aurora's eyes sought Nathaniel. He was there, leaning against a column, his face unreadable. For a moment she believed he would do nothing. Then, with measured calm, he stepped forward. Before we condemn a lady of society with mere whispers, he said, his grave voice cutting through the noise, let us remember something. The thief always plays with hysteria. Is it not suspicious that the evidence appears in the most obvious place, on the most crowded night? A tense silence followed. No one dared contradict him outright, but the doubt lingered, like poison in a cup of wine. Aurora lifted her chin, proud despite the blow. I thank you for your intervention, Lord Blackwood. But I do not need rescuers. I need the truth. He held her gaze, and in his eyes there was a new spark, not mockery, not challenge, but recognition. Later, alone in her chamber, Aurora opened her notebook with trembling hands and wrote. Today they made me a piece of the game. The thief knows I suspect. He tried to silence me with public shame. He will not succeed. New certainty. My enemy steals not only jewels. He steals reputations. And now he wants mine. She closed the notebook with a sharp snap and swore silently she would not give the thief the pleasure of seeing her fall. Chapter 11 A Pact in the Shadows. The following days were a parade of uneasy silences and evasive glances. Aurora felt it at every social visit, the fans that once opened at her approach now snapped shut with barely disguised disdain, conversations stopped the moment she entered a room, and some invitations simply ceased to arrive at the Pembroke residence. My lady, her maid dared to say one morning while fastening her gown, I heard they struck your name from the Cavendish guest list. Aurora feigned indifference, but pressed tightly against the notebook hidden in her skirts. Each rumor was like a wound. The society that had once celebrated her now looked upon her with distrust, as though she herself had hidden the stolen jewels in her dressing table. That afternoon, when an anonymous note slipped under her door, she understood she was not alone in this fall from grace. Midnight. Cavendish Square Gardens. Come alone. Aurora hesitated, but the dark ink and steady hand of the script felt familiar. Nathaniel. The tower clock struck 12 as she descended, wrapped in a dark cloak, into the silent heart of the gardens. There, among shadows and moss-covered statues, she found him. Nathaniel emerged from the gloom as if he had been waiting for her for centuries. Lady Pembroke, he said softly, bowing his head slightly. It seems we have both become suspects. And conveniently isolated, she replied, her cold tone barely hiding the tremor in her voice. The silence that followed carried more than suspicion. It was the certainty that apart, they would be devoured by rumor, but together, they might challenge the true culprit. I propose an agreement, Nathaniel continued, stepping closer. Let us stop watching each other as enemies. Let us act in the shadows, together. You have eyes no one can ignore. I have access to places where a lady could never step without raising scandal. Aurora regarded him with caution, but also with a glimmer of relief. If I accept, there is no turning back. Precisely, he nodded. You do not betray me, and I do not expose you. We cover for one another, until the thief falls. Aurora pressed the notebook against her chest and, after a moment that felt eternal, extended her hand. So be it, Lord Blackwood. A pact in the shadows. Nathaniel clasped her hand firmly. And in that secret touch, beneath the cold light of the moon, a dangerous alliance was born. The game of suspicion had become a shared conspiracy. But as they sealed their accord, neither noticed they were being watched. A still figure, hidden behind the garden hedges, recorded every word, every gesture, in calculated silence. The game was no longer private, a third player had entered the scene. Chapter 12: Shadows in the Gardens. What a curious habit of yours, Lady Pembroke, to write everything down. Though, of course, there are things one does not learn in notebooks, but in a proper cradle. The faint crack of a branch made Aurora release Nathaniel's hand at once. Instinct forced her to turn, her eyes scanning the dim hedge shadows. "Did you hear that?" she whispered, heart racing. Nathaniel's hand was already resting on the cane he always carried, not as an accessory but as a discreet weapon. "We are not alone," he said with dangerous calm, his gaze fixed on the darkness. Aurora held her breath. For several eternal seconds, nothing moved. Only the murmur of wind in the branches. And yet she was certain, someone had been there. Someone had seen them seal their pact. "If they discover us," she began. "They already have," Nathaniel interrupted gravely. "The question is, who?" The echo of quick footsteps fading toward the garden gate confirmed their suspicions. Aurora made to run after the shadow, but Nathaniel caught her arm. "No. It would be a useless chase now. And worse, a scandal if anyone saw us together at this hour." Aurora closed her eyes for an instant, painfully aware of her position. Society already isolated her with rumors, and if someone now spread word that she had secretly met Lord Blackwood in the middle of the night, her reputation would be ruined forever. "Then what do we do?" she asked, her voice a thin thread barely hiding her anxiety. Nathaniel studied her intently, with that serene air that drove Aurora mad between irritation and fascination. "The same as we already agreed, act together. But now more carefully than ever. If someone is following us, it means they are too close to the real culprit." Silence wrapped them once again. Aurora clutched her notebook tightly, aware that every note could be turned against her. Nathaniel leaned closer, his voice reduced to a whisper. "From this moment on, Lady Pembroke, trust no one. Not even your oldest friends. The thief does not act alone." Aurora shivered. It was not only the weight of suspicion, but the certainty that her game of deductions was no longer innocent. They now stood at the center of an invisible web, and someone had already moved the first piece against them. "Then," she murmured, with a resolve that even surprised Nathaniel, "let the hunt begin." He gave the faintest smile, and together they left the garden, fully aware that every step might be watched by hidden eyes. In the distance, beyond the gate, a metallic glint flashed under the moon. It was not a stolen jewel, but the gleam of something far more threatening, the buckle of a sword at the belt of an unknown figure. The game had just turned deadly. Chapter 13: The Face in the Crowd. The dawn in London did not bring calm, but even fiercer rumors. Aurora knew it the moment she crossed her family's breakfast room. Her mother was holding a crumpled newspaper, her expression taut. "Aurora," she said sharply. "They are speaking of you." The young woman's heart clenched. The paper mentioned no names, but in a venomous column it referred to a lady far too curious, seen in the company of a gentleman of dubious reputation in the gardens of Cavendish Square. Aurora understood what it meant. Someone had not only seen them. Someone wanted to destroy them. Later, at a discreet reception in the Harlow residence, the tension became unbearable. Aurora moved among greetings and practiced smiles, aware of the inquisitive glances. And then, between fans and murmurs, she saw her. A familiar figure. Miss Harriet Wycliffe, with her ever-sharp smile, was watching her from the other side of the drawing room. She did not avert her gaze, as though savoring a secret. When their eyes met, Harriet raised a glass in a silent toast meant only for Aurora. Lady Pembroke felt her blood turn cold. Nathaniel, who had arrived minutes later, came to her side feigning indifference. "Who is she?" he murmured, without turning his head. "Harriet," Aurora replied, barely moving her lips. "She knows something." Nathaniel narrowed his eyes. "Or perhaps she was the one who followed us." Aurora clenched her fan so tightly that the lace nearly tore. She knew Harriet had always possessed a venomous tongue, but now she seemed to be taking far too much pleasure in her disgrace. Then, Aurora whispered, with the resolve of one who refuses to retreat, "It is time we also watch those who believe they have us cornered." And while music filled the drawing room, Nathaniel and Aurora silently pledged themselves to a new goal, to discover whether Harriet Wycliffe was merely a spectator, or the invisible hand moving the threads of theft and scandal. Chapter 14: The Theft Amid the Dance. Curious detail, sir. First you claimed you were standing by the piano, then that you never left it. Which is it? Lady Cavendish's drawing room sparkled that night like a theatre on its most anticipated premiere. Crystal chandeliers poured light over gowns of silk, and the music of the quartet spun couples around in a flawless waltz. Aurora, her fan closed in her hand, feigned a smile. But her attention was fixed on one figure in particular, Harriet Wycliffe. The young woman moved from group to group with her enigmatic smile, always far too close to jewels that did not belong to her. Even so, Aurora could not ignore the constant whispering around her. "Have you heard?" murmured one lady. Lady Pembroke was seen in the gardens of Cavendish Square, alone with Lord Blackwood. And they say the thefts began precisely when she started appearing at all the balls. Aurora tightened her grip on the fan. Society had already placed her name on the list of suspects, and every poisoned glance seemed to remind her of it. "You watch her like a hawk," murmured Nathaniel at her side, his eyes fixed on the dance floor. "And so do you," Aurora replied, a spark in her gaze. "Admit it, Harriet is far too convenient to be innocent." Her remark was cut short when a sudden murmur rippled through the room. A lady let out a strangled cry in the middle of the waltz, interrupting the music as though a string had snapped. "My necklace!" Lady Ashcroft exclaimed, clutching both hands to her bare neck. "My pearl necklace is gone." Chaos erupted at once. Gentlemen rushed to close the doors, ladies withdrew with trembling fans, and the hostess paled as though her reputation were slipping away along with the stolen pearls. Aurora shivered. Barely a minute had passed since she had seen Harriet cross near Lady Ashcroft. She searched the crowd for Miss Wycliffe, but Harriet now stood in the center of the room, surrounded by onlookers, feigning outrage. "How brazen," Harriet declared, her voice loud enough for all to hear. "To steal in the middle of a dance, in Lady Cavendish's own house, this is intolerable." Aurora narrowed her eyes. The performance was too perfect, too immediate. Nathaniel, beside her, inclined his head slightly. "Too quick to accuse," he whispered. As though she had been waiting for this very moment. Aurora opened her notebook and scribbled furiously. "Theft on the dance floor. Pearl necklace. Harriet Wycliffe, present and theatrical in her indignation. Far too convenient." But when she lifted her gaze, she noticed something even more venomous. Several ladies were staring at her, not at Harriet, with eyes full of suspicion. One of them murmured, "How curious, whenever a theft occurs, Lady Pembroke is always nearby." Aurora swallowed hard. Harriet seemed to feed on the scandal, but it was Aurora's reputation that was sinking deeper and deeper. Chapter 15: Contradictory Clues. If good taste were contagious, I fear this room would be empty. The echo of the theft at Lady Cavendish's house spread like wildfire through the dry forest of London society. By the next day, the gatherings were a hive of conjectures. Some swore that Harriet Wycliffe had lingered far too close to the missing necklace, while others insisted her feigned outrage had been so theatrical it seemed like a rehearsed performance. But there was no shortage of voices pointing directly at Aurora. "Lady Pembroke is always the first to arrive and the last to leave," murmured one in a tea room. "Who's to say she isn't the one hiding the jewels and then pretending to search for them? And that odd habit of hers, scribbling in a little notebook, very like someone cataloging their loot." Aurora, seated with her untouched cup of tea, heard each word like a poisoned dart. The notebook that gave her strength had turned into proof of her supposed guilt. That very afternoon, Nathaniel discreetly led her into the Ashcrofts' library, where a trusted servant awaited them. The man, his face grave and his voice low, spoke without preamble. "My lord, my lady, the pearl necklace was found this morning in an unexpected place, the music room of the mansion, inside a chest of sheet music." Aurora's eyes widened. In the music room? How is that possible? The servant lowered his voice even further. A footman found it, and he swears he saw leaving that room Viscount Ashbury. Nathaniel exchanged a quick glance with Aurora. The Viscount, supposedly wronged in an earlier theft, appeared once more, not as victim, but as possible accomplice. Curious, don't you think, Lady Pembroke? Nathaniel murmured with irony. Far too convenient that the stolen necklace should resurface in the very same house, and tied to the man who always protests the loudest. Aurora bit the end of her quill. And far too perfect to exonerate Harriet. If the necklace was hidden elsewhere, who moved it? Who wanted to divert our attention? The doubt settled between them like an unseen third guest. Harriet remained a suspect, but now the figure of Viscount Ashbury loomed like a puppeteer, pulling strings to confuse them all. Aurora wrote in her notebook, with bold, steady letters. Harriet. Visible face of suspicion. Ashbury. Shadow in the wings. Key question. Did they act together, or one against the other? Nathaniel read the note over her shoulder and, for the first time, smiled with a spark of complicity. At last, my lady, it seems we are hunting something far larger than a drawing-room thief. Aurora snapped the notebook shut and raised her gaze. But as she did, the malicious voices of that morning returned to her mind. Society was already condemning her. Then, Lord Blackwood, we must prepare for a hunt on two fronts, against the true thief, and against the rumors bent on destroying me. Chapter 16 The Waltz of Suspicions. The Montague mansion glittered with light and music that night. The ball, hastily announced after the scandal of Lady Ashcroft's necklace, was a desperate attempt to restore some illusion to the season. Yet among the gilded mirrors and forced laughter, the air was thick with tension. Aurora sensed it the moment she crossed the threshold of the ballroom. Conversations faltered for an instant, just long enough for her to notice the shift, fans snapping shut, smiles freezing mid-gesture, heads bending together in hurried whispers. There she is, a female voice murmured behind her. She always appears where the thefts occur. And they say the police watch her in secret, another replied. Imagine the scandal if she turns out guilty. Aurora walked with her head held high, feigning indifference, though every word pierced her like a dagger. The society that had once welcomed her with enthusiasm now regarded her with suspicion, as if her gown might be concealing half the pearls of London. She positioned herself at one end of the gallery, from where she could observe the dance floor. Outwardly serene, fan in hand, she seethed with powerless fury. In that ballroom filled with glitter and music, she knew she was the unwanted guest. It was then Nathaniel appeared at her side. His mere presence drew fresh stares and whispers. Some faces showed astonishment, others indignation, as though the entire company expected him to avoid her. Instead, Nathaniel extended his arm with the unflinching elegance of a gentleman utterly sure of himself. Lady Pembroke, he said in a low voice, may I have this waltz? Aurora looked at him in surprise. A waltz? With you? I thought you swore never to join these charades. Nathaniel arched one brow with unyielding calm. Let us make an exception. While we turn across the floor, no one will suspect that we are observing. And believe me, my lady, there is much to see tonight. Aurora placed her hand upon his arm, fully aware that with that single gesture she was defying the entire room. At the center of the hall, the musicians struck up a new melody, and together they stepped onto the dance floor, becoming the focus of every gaze. Chapter 17 Whispers in the Shadows. Do you know, Lady Pembroke? I have learned that the best secrets are not hidden in darkness but in plain sight. The waltz continued, but Aurora barely heard the music. Each turn with Nathaniel gave her a new perspective of the ballroom, and in one of them she saw them again, Harriet and Viscount Ashbury, standing apart near a column, their heads far too close for it to be accidental. They are conspiring, Aurora murmured, keeping her polite smile fixed on her face. Or pretending to, Nathaniel replied softly. In this city, nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Aurora raised her fan to partially cover her lips. From behind the feathers she pretended to wave the air while carefully observing. Harriet laughed softly, but her hands moved quickly. She seemed to slip a small object into the Viscount's inner pocket. Aurora's chest tightened. "Did you see that?" "Yes," Nathaniel nodded, spinning her just in time to prevent anyone from noticing their observation. "But the question is she giving him something stolen, or planting it to incriminate him?" The music reached its climax and the couples applauded enthusiastically, oblivious to the hidden game unfolding behind the scenes. Nathaniel led Aurora to the edge of the floor and, pretending to offer her a glass, leaned closer. "We must intercept them before they leave the ballroom." Aurora looked at him with determination. "If Harriet is manipulating the evidence, tonight might give us the key we need." The plan was sealed with a single exchange of glances. Nathaniel moved toward the side gallery, Aurora following with a steady step. They pretended to be apart, yet their movements fit together like pieces on the same board. In the dark corridor, the opportunity came. Harriet and Ashbury slipped out hastily, as if seeking a secluded corner. Nathaniel hid behind a tapestry, Aurora behind a half-open door. And there, in the silence of the passageway, they caught a fragment of conversation that froze their blood. "No more mistakes, Ashbury," Harriet whispered, her voice unexpectedly hard. "If we fail this time, it will be us hanging from the gallows." Aurora held her breath. From his hiding place, Nathaniel clenched his fist. The confirmation was clear. Harriet was not merely a victim of rumors. She played a much darker role. And yet, Ashbury's final words left them even more unsettled. "Don't worry. He will never suspect we're working together." Aurora turned toward Nathaniel, her heart pounding. Who were they talking about? The mystery had just multiplied. Chapter 18: The Price of Scandal. The commotion began before the orchestra played its first note. A bracelet had mysteriously vanished from the vestibule. The morning after the ball at the Montague residence brought something more poisonous than the dew over Mayfair's flowers, an anonymous article in the Social Gazette. A lady of the highest society, known for her excessive curiosity and her indecorous nocturnal outings, has once again been seen in the company of Lord N.B. Coinciding, most conveniently, with the disappearance of new jewels. Aurora dropped the newspaper onto the breakfast table. Her mother turned pale, and her father slammed the arm of his chair in fury. "This is intolerable. Your reputation is ruined, Aurora." The young woman pressed her lips together, swallowing both anger and fear. She knew that the lady of excessive curiosity was none other than herself. That very afternoon, the tea rooms and private parlors buzzed with venom disguised as courtesy. Soon, no one will invite her to any salon. Perhaps it was her all along. And that Lord Blackwood, her accomplice. Aurora, hidden behind her fan, heard every word as if they were knives. What no one knew was that the invisible wound hurt more than any threat. Each rumor cut into her pride, each averted glance a reminder that society longed to see her fall. By nightfall, a carriage stopped before her house. Nathaniel descended, somber, a folded newspaper in his hand. "You must not go out alone, Lady Pembroke." "Not now." Aurora looked at him with a flash of wounded pride. "Have you come to chastise me as well, my lord?" He slowly shook his head. "No. I have come to warn you. Someone is pulling the strings with too much precision. Harriet and Ashbury are playing their parts, but they are not the only ones. And if the whispers reach the press, it is because someone powerful is feeding them." Aurora frowned. "Are you implying there is a third player?" Nathaniel remained silent for a moment, then placed on the table a crumpled note he had received that morning. Only 3 words were written in a firm, unfamiliar hand. "She will fall soon." Aurora looked at him, her heart chilled. Me?" Nathaniel held her gaze, grave, unwavering. "Or someone wants us both to believe so." A heavy silence enveloped them. For the first time, Aurora realized that the danger threatened more than her reputation. She was caught in a board designed by cruel minds, playing with them all. And she swore, clutching her notebook to her chest, that she would not allow herself to be used as a pawn in that game. Chapter 19 Among Masks and Suspicions. The following days were a parade of withdrawn invitations and letters returned unopened. Aurora could hardly step outside without feeling eyes fixed on her back, as though each step she took confirmed the suspicions. At Lady Worthington's gathering, even the most cordial ladies pretended not to see her. Only the fans whispered among feathers and lace. Word is Lord Blackwood sends her flowers. They say he teaches her to hide evidence himself. Aurora held her head high, though a knot formed in her throat. I will not give them the satisfaction of seeing me tremble, she repeated to herself. Nathaniel arrived late, as always, with his impenetrable bearing. He cut through the murmur until he reached her side. You must leave, he said in a low voice. They are waiting for you to slip. Aurora looked at him with irony. And let them win? No, my lord. I prefer to dance in their own venomous hall. Nathaniel frowned, but seeing the determination in her eyes, he extended his hand. Then dance with me. If they must watch, let them do it properly. The entire hall turned toward them as they stepped onto the floor. The stairs were daggers, but Aurora clung to the rhythm of the waltz and to the firm hold of Nathaniel's hand. Between turn and turn, hidden behind the music, they began to speak. Harriet smiles too much tonight, Aurora whispered. Because she believes she has us cornered, he replied. Aurora feigned a light laugh, leaning closer. And what if she's right? The evidence always vanishes. The rumors grow. We have nothing solid against them. Nathaniel lowered his voice to a barely audible murmur. I've heard something among Ashbury's servants. They don't speak of thefts, but of rounds and moves. As though it were not crime, but a game. Aurora stared at him in astonishment, though she never lost the rhythm of the dance. A game? Nathaniel nodded gravely. They don't do it for money. They do it for the thrill of taking, of watching another's reputation burn. A shiver ran through Aurora. Suddenly, everything fit, the jewels returned, the accusations without proof, the ease with which rumors spread. It was not greed. It was cruelty. When the music ended, Nathaniel did not release her immediately. With a slight bow, he murmured close to her ear. If it's a game, then we can force them to lose in public. Aurora lifted her fan to hide the smile that escaped her. For the first time in weeks, she felt the balance might tip in her favor. But at that very moment, Harriet swept past them, letting fall a barely audible remark. Careful, dear Aurora. Sometimes, the one who thinks she's watching the game is already being moved as a piece. Aurora froze. Harriet not only knew they suspected her, she seemed to be savoring the danger. The game had entered its darkest stage. Chapter 20 The Trap of the Ball. If gentlemen were as careful with their promises as they are with their pocket watches, the world would be a far more reliable place. The evening at Lady Worthington's was the climax of the season. The ballroom, lit by hundreds of candelabras, glittered as if every crystal and every laugh were diamonds suspended in the air. But Aurora saw neither light nor silk, only the invisible net she and Nathaniel had laid. At the center of the room, resting on a velvet table, lay the most talked-about jewel of the moment, a necklace of blue sapphires, heirloom of the Pembrokes and now lent to Lady Worthington as a symbol of trust. It will be irresistible to them, Nathaniel murmured at her side, his face impassive. And this time they won't escape, Aurora replied, gripping her fan firmly. The ball unfolded in waltzes and frivolous chatter, yet Aurora kept her eyes sharp. Harriet was smiling far too much, far too serenely, as if already savoring her triumph. Ashbury loitered near the necklace with feigned indifference, conversing with a group of gentlemen. Then it happened. During a change of dance, with the ballroom distracted, a maid entered carrying a tray of refreshments. Aurora watched as Ashbury let his glove fall onto the table and, with a nearly imperceptible motion, slipped the necklace inside it. Now, Aurora whispered. She strode forward, heart-pounding. Before Ashbury could step away, her voice cut through the murmur of the hall. One moment, Lord Ashbury. Have you forgotten something? Every face turned toward them. Nathaniel stepped ahead, lifting the fallen glove. With solemn composure, he opened it before the gathering. the necklace glittered under the lights, unmistakable. A gasp rippled through the room. Harriet turned pale, her lips trembling. Ashbury tried to muster a smile, but it was too late. "That's absurd," he stammered. "Someone must have planted it on me." "In your own glove?" Nathaniel's grave voice carried across the hall. "Hardly, my lord." Aurora stepped forward, her gaze fixed on Harriet. "Will you not defend him, Lady Harriet? Or perhaps you would prefer to explain to society how you both have done this again and again?" Fans quivered. No one breathed. Harriet closed her eyes for an instant, and when she opened them, the mask had fallen. A dry laugh escaped her throat. "Very well. Yes. We did it. And so what? Do you think this was about jewels? No, ladies and gentlemen. It was about pleasure. About proving that all of you, with your airs of grandeur, are nothing more than puppets." Ashbury, defiant, added clearly. "Every rumor, every scandal, every lost jewel, was our work. A wager between Harriet and me. And all of you were our board." The hall erupted in cries of horror. Lady Worthington clutched her chest. Some gentlemen tried to hide their indignation with nervous coughs. But the damage was done. Harriet and Ashbury had exposed themselves. Nathaniel raised the necklace high, like a trophy of justice. "The game is over. And this time, you will not hide behind rumors." Aurora, her head held high, added in a serene tone that rang like a sentence. "You played with all of us. But tonight, London has seen who you truly are." The silence that followed was more devastating than any whisper. In a matter of minutes, Harriet and Ashbury had gone from predators to prey. And Aurora, at last, had reclaimed her name. Chapter 21: The Judgment of Society. The uproar in Lady Worthington's ballroom was immediate. No one wished to be seen beside Harriet or Ashbury. Fans snapped shut, glasses were abandoned, and, like a flock fleeing from the wolf, the gathering pulled away from them. A farce. Ashbury tried to shout, but his voice was drowned out by cries of indignation. "You have disgraced the season," Lord Montague retorted, his face aflame. "In my very house." Harriet, her brow beaded with sweat, searched for an ally, but even her most ardent friends hurried to retreat. Lady Worthington herself, her expression frozen, raised her voice so all could hear. "Be warned, you shall never again be welcome in my salon." That pronouncement was like a bell tolling their ruin. High society, ever fickle, turned on them in the blink of an eye. What had been complicit smiles only an hour before transformed into glances of disgust. Aurora stood still, serene, though her heart trembled. For the first time in weeks, she was not the target of accusing eyes. She was witness to the weight of suspicion crumbling from her shoulders only to fall, with merciless force, upon those who had placed her on the scaffold. Nathaniel stepped to her side, his solemn bearing a wall of protection. "It is done," he murmured. Aurora gave the faintest nod, her gaze never leaving Harriet. The ruined young woman pushed her way through the crowd in frantic steps. Before leaving, she turned sharply, her eyes fixed on Aurora. "Do not claim victory yet, dear. You may have won this round, but the game never ends." A murmur of scandal rippled through the onlookers. Ashbury followed, his expression unhinged, and together they departed the hall amid whistles and whispers. Aurora drew a deep breath. Suddenly, several ladies approached, some with words of apology, others with hurried excuses, as if they could erase weeks of scorn with a single gesture. Lady Worthington, first to condemn the traitors, inclined with a newly polished smile. "You have shown admirable composure, Lady Pembroke. London will not forget this night." Aurora replied with a polite gesture, though inside she knew those same tongues might turn against her again if circumstances shifted. Yet for the first time, she did not care. When Nathaniel offered his arm, she accepted without hesitation. They crossed the ballroom together, and though voices swirled around them, Aurora heard only one certainty: she had survived the judgment of society. And with Nathaniel at her side, she was ready to write a new destiny. Epilogue: the beginning of a manual. The weeks that followed the scandal were a carousel of unexpected turns. Harriet and Ashbury, silenced and disgraced, slipped out of London in secrecy, hounded by shame. Their names were never spoken in public again, except as whispered warnings. Aurora, on the other hand, had regained more than her place, she had reclaimed her voice. Invitations poured in at her door, though she opened them with a wry smile. "How swiftly loyalties change," she remarked one afternoon, eyeing the mountain of envelopes. "Today they adore me, yesterday they scorned me." Nathaniel, standing by the window, replied calmly. "Because you dared to do what they never will, defy hypocrisy." She looked at him, eyes sparkling with the same irreverence that had ignited this story. And this time, without fear of gossip, she stepped closer. "And you, my lord, are you not afraid to bind your name to a woman so inconvenient to society?" Nathaniel's lips curved faintly as he leaned toward her. "I am not afraid, Aurora. On the contrary, it is the wisest choice I have ever made." Aurora allowed her fingers to entwine with his, realizing that the true prize had never been clearing her reputation, but discovering this bond. That very night, in the quiet of her room, Aurora opened the notebook that had once kept record of the thefts. Among the scribbles of suspicions and clues, several blank pages awaited. She studied them for a moment and, with a mischievous smile, wrote at the top, "Manual of the Irreverent Young Lady for Surviving Society." Then, with steady hand, she set down the first rule. Rule number 1. Never allow society to decide who you are. That power belongs to you, and only you. She closed the notebook with satisfaction, knowing her story did not end there. Perhaps another young woman, in another season, would one day find in those pages the weapon she needed to face the games of high society. Aurora extinguished the candle. Outside, London slept. Inside, her heart did not. Nathaniel, his hand in hers, and that manual yet to be written were the promise of a new beginning. Thank you for joining me in this beautiful story. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did sharing it with you. If you liked it, I invite you to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Whispers by Maga Audiobooks, so you won't miss any of my upcoming releases.